Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here as part of this amazing lineup of speakers, although it's very stressful going after someone like Laura Hogan earlier in the day, because now I'm thinking about the structure of my thing. I'm thinking about spiders, and do I have to go to the bathroom? And it's very, very stressful. But I'm going to try to keep it together up here, and we're going to talk about retrospectives. So this is me. And as Mary said, I'm a director of engineering at Twitter. I help lead engineering ops up in London. I'm also part of the video org there, so I supervise teams both in London and Boston. I used to be at Living Social before that, and a little shout out to the Living Socialers who are in the audience, and some of our speakers already today. I also used to be a member of the US Air Force, so I served for 6 years. And so over the course of my career, I've led lots of different kinds of teams and lots of different kinds of environments. I've led small teams, I've led teams of teams, and along the way, I sort of picked up some interesting habits. One of them was, of course, becoming a certified Scrum Master, which is the first time I really heard about this wacky thing called retrospectives. So when I thought about the kind of talk I wanted to give, ultimately what I thought would be good was to give you to equip you with some practical advice that you could take back and share with your teams right away. And so this is a very tactical talk, just for everyone's awareness. So we're actually going to go over 5 different types of retros that you can immediately start using with your team as of today after this talk. And most importantly, I want you to not just understand those 5 types of retros, but when you should use each type of retro and why you should use each type of retro. All right, so this is the audience participation part of the talk. So how many folks in here do retrospectives on a regular basis with your teams, like every 2 weeks? Pretty good, pretty good. So some hands up, a lot of hands not up though. And that's something that sort of troubled me because I really believe in the power of retrospectives, but I see them done wrong a lot across the industry. And one of the first things I see is people tend to do, they learn about retrospectives and they say, well, you talk about what went well and what didn't go well. You talk about what should get better, and then that's the basis of their understanding for retros. And so what happens is over time, the retros feel very stale. You're kind of, to steal Aaron's term, you end up in that groundhog meeting where it feels like every retro you're going over the same things, and it's pretty boring stuff. And it's because people really don't understand what they are doing when they're doing retros. And so they don't understand the method behind the madness. And so they're kind of going through the motions as they've been taught, but they don't fundamentally understand how to use retros to maximize the outputs they're getting out of their team. They are often poorly facilitated, and that's a very painful thing for me to sort of sit and witness. There is an art to sort of facilitating a group meeting, and so hopefully I'll give you some tips on how to facilitate your retros better today. And this is probably the most critical sin, and this is how you get into that groundhog meeting, which is we talk about what's not going well, but we actually don't do anything about it, right? And so we don't do any action items to correct things. And so again, that's how you get caught in that Groundhog Day word, because you talk about what's wrong, but you never address it. Next time you do a retro, guess what? That thing is still wrong. And so that item keeps coming up over and over again in your retro. So a lot of mistakes people make. This first one, I think, comes up a lot, particularly if you are a manager or even a team lead you're also playing the facilitator role. And what happens is you go in with your manager hat on, you say, I've got an agenda. I want to get this out of the retrospective. But you really need to understand what retrospectives is. They're actually not about you. They're about the team. It's a forum for the team to talk about the things that are bothering them. And most importantly, it's a forum to empower the team to fix what's happening themselves. So it's a chance for them to have input into their processes. And if you go in there and you already have predetermined what you think is wrong with your team, and you've already identified all of the things you want to change about your team, then you're going to do the retro wrong, because you're not really going to be receptive to the feedback you're hearing in those retros. And again, like I said, we collect that feedback, but because we don't identify action items, we don't take any corrective actions. We also introduce bias into the sticky note process. I've been in a lot of retros where people say, let's open a spreadsheet and just start writing in the spreadsheet, right? Or they start talking out loud as they're writing their sticky notes. And the important thing about the retro is you want everyone to have a chance to put their input in a safe way without being biased by the other people in the room. And so what happens is if I know what someone else is writing, I may instinctively think, well, maybe I should write that same thing down as well. Or if I see them write down something that contradicts what I'm about to say, I may be too scared to put that down. Often when we collect the stickies, then you put all the stickies up, and then you just start reading them one by one. That's another huge mistake, because what happens is you end up talking very tactically about the very specific item on that one sticky note, And whoever goes first, you talk about 50% of the meeting just about their one sticky. And then by the time you get to the rest of the stickies, you sort of run out of time. And then the worst thing that can happen is you just stop doing retros. Or you only do them when something has gone terribly wrong. And I've had this happen to me at a company where we were sort of sitting around and we had some kind of crisis with one of the build systems, and someone said, wow, that's not great. We should probably do a retro. And I was like, ooh, this is not the time to have that conversation. Waiting until things go terribly wrong to have a retrospective is like waiting until your house is on fire to install smoke detectors. And I like that metaphor because it kind of gets to the heart of why I think it's important to do retros. It's not just about seeing what went wrong yesterday or sort of identifying the problems that are happening today. It's not just about detecting that smoke. It's about then being enabled to do something about that smoke before it becomes a raging inferno that engulfs your team. And I think a lot of people who have that attitude are really mistaking the concept of a post-mortem with a retrospective, and those are different concepts. So it's very important you start to take that away. Another reason that I think retros are really important is because talking about feelings is actually very challenging for teams. And I think it was Erin was talking earlier in her thing about you have to build trust with your team, right? And I think a lot of us, having been in the software engineering field, I think we like to talk about facts and numbers and concrete things. Talking about feelings feels very uncomfortable, right? It's awkward. It feels weird to sort of talk out loud about what's going on with all, I always joke about I have all the feels because that's my defense mechanism because I find it uncomfortable to talk about feelings. Sometimes you talk about the feelings, but you don't talk about what's behind them. And so it's really difficult to understand, well, you're angry, but I don't know, what does that mean? Like, why are you angry? And most importantly, like I said, it's very, very scary to talk about feelings because to talk about feelings is to make yourself vulnerable. And some teams might not be there yet where they have that trust built up, where it's okay to be vulnerable. And what's nice about retrospectives is it gives you a safe forum and it gives you some very easy guidelines to surface a lot of those feelings in a way that is organic, but also like the person feels protected because we're all sort of doing it. And some of the techniques I'll show you have a way of sort of teasing out feelings before people even know that's happening. So the key takeaway is you can accomplish a lot of things with retrospectives. Like I said, it's not just about seeing what went wrong, although it certainly is good to surface, sort of what happened. But more importantly, it's not just about what happened, but why did it happen, right? What's the root cause? What are the hidden problems and blockers lurking beneath the surface that we're not talking about? There's all these different things they can do. I'm not going to read the whole list to you. But again, like I said, because people have a very basic understanding of retrospectives, they think all retrospectives are created equal. And so you sort of end up in this situation where you might not be using the right retro at the right time with your teams. Instead, what I want you to think about is there's a whole spectrum of different types of retrospectives that you can apply with your teams to do whatever task you're trying to accomplish on that bulleted list. And so you should think of your retros as a complete collection of very specific tools that you should pull out at the right time for the right job. All right, so I'm going to get into the bulk of things. This is me on my way to run a retro when I'm having a good day. I got my whiteboard there. I've got my candy cigarette, and I'm ready to go. So before I get into the 5 types of retrospectives, I want to talk really quickly about the clustering pattern and why you should use it with your retros, because I'm going to talk about that when I get into some of the more specific retros. Like I said before, one of the key mistakes people make are sort of reading the sticky notes one by one, and then you sort of end up in this thing where you're fixating on the content of that individual sticky. But what you're really trying to draw out in retros are larger patterns, right? It's not just about one isolated incident. It's about something that's sort of persistent, some bad process, some code smell that's sort of holding your team back. So instead of reading all the sticky notes, what I ask people to do is once the stickies are all posted, we pick team members, and they say, for the first category, I want you to look at all the stickies that are under that category, and I want you to group them into like clusters. So things that seem to be talking about the same general thing, put them together, and then I want you to summarize what that cluster is about. And why is this powerful? Why do we do it this way? There's an effect in psychology called the echo effect. And studies have shown that the simple act of mirroring back someone else's words to them builds empathy and builds understanding. So that's the first thing, is often you will sort of read the stickies as you're grouping them. But I like to take it a step further, and the reason I ask teammates to do the grouping instead of myself is I want them to think about what their teammates have just told them in sticky form. and I want them to put it in their own words. And that's sort of what you're doing. You say, can you summarize what this cluster is all about? And again, it lets you address the larger issue. It's not that, okay, this system failed last night and this system failed this other night and this thing. What you might see in that larger cluster is, oh, we've got an alerting problem, right? That's the main thing that happened that caused 5 different people's lives to go off the rails. So you want to focus on those larger sort of issues. The other thing that clusters do is it actually shows your teammates that they are not alone. Whatever they're feeling, whatever's bothering them, I can't tell you how many teams I've done this with, and they are shocked that someone else has seen the same problem as them, or they're feeling the same way. So that's a really powerful sensation. It really shows you that your team is aligned. Yes, we all do care, and we all care about these same things. And now we can talk honestly about maybe fixing that. And so I guess then the obvious follow-on is, well, what if you're not in the cluster, right? What if there are outliers? That's okay too. The number one thing you're trying to do when you lead a team is you really want to be sensitive to a team that isn't aligned, right? It's a team that is not on the same page. If you see someone who's an outlier consistently, they're not in the same clusters, it means they are not thinking about the same priorities or things that the rest of the team is thinking about, and you can address that honestly and openly with them, and we can talk about that. If you don't have any clusters, it may or may not be a bad thing. You'll have to interpret, read the tea leaves in the moment, so I don't want to over-prescribe there. But if you don't see a lot of clusters, again, that might be a sign that your team isn't fully aligned. Okay, so let's get right into it. The first retro that I'm going to recommend you all give a try out with your teams is one called the 4 ELLs. So for each of these, I'm going to tell you how to run it, and we're going to talk about why you're going to use it and when you should use it. So for the 4 ELLs, instead of doing what went wrong, what didn't go well, what should we change, you instead ask the team to fill out sticky notes with the following categories: I liked, I lacked, I longed for, and I learned. Now, there's a lot of content on these slides, so there is a bit.ly link. The slides will be up here later. I'll post them tonight. So if you want to grab these later, don't feel like you have to write everything down here. So why do I like the 4 ELLs? First of all, I'm always comfortable with the what went wrong category. I think a lot of times that feels very judgy, right? And I think people are reluctant to sometimes provide input into that. So I think wrong is a provocative word, so it takes it out of the conversation. And I like these words instead. I think they're very meaty words, like, well, but didn't go well. And you get very tepid responses from teams, I find, over time. But like lacked, I longed for, those are meaty words that really, they're very evocative. And I think it's very easy to then respond to them. You say, oh, what makes me feel that way? And then you can sort of respond to that. I do get a lot of questions about what is the difference between lacked and longed for. So generally, lacked tends to be where you put things that are very tactical. It's something very small that's easily correctable. Like, I lacked a powerful enough laptop. Well, I can fix that in one chat with the IT department, right? I longed for a more modern or progressive front-end framework. That's, we can chat, and that's really important to surface. But those are the kind of things that probably come up that are longed for. Longed for are things that are persistent, things that are sort of bothering the team that they don't have, and so you want to get it there. I also really like the learned category. I think it's really important. I think another speaker talked a lot about how we learn so much from failure, right? We don't learn from success. So instead of just fixating on what went wrong, by just saying, what did you learn from it? It puts your team in that growth mindset. It sort of takes that failure and you're instantly trying to make a positive sort of learning out of that. And even if it's just, I learned what color your face turned when I push code that doesn't have tests, right? Someone said that to me once. I said, well, it's red, so don't do that. Don't do that. I also like that it puts a first-person perspective on it. So it's really about what happened in this sprint, how it affected me personally. And so again, it's starting to build those things of trust because you're talking about, oh, well, this is how I feel about this thing. I like that, or I didn't like that. I'm lacking something to get my job done, and that stresses me out. And you can have really good conversations just around those words. This is a great one. You can use this all the time. You can use this in your regular sprints, if you're doing sprints or whatever your cadence is, when you're weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. So you can use them early and often. It's a good one to sort of diagnose root cause. Lacked is a really ripe category to find process improvements because those are things you can probably solve pretty quickly. If you're running conferences, training, events, it's a good one to sort of run with your participants because again, you sort of want to say, what did you like about the conference, right? What did you lack? What did you long for that I didn't cover? So you can get some really meaningful outputs out of your team with this one. Retro number 2, draw how the sprint went. This one's a lot of fun. I really, really adore this one. It's very simple. You hand out blank sheets of paper and pens, preferably pens of multiple colors, and you say, draw the sprint, or draw the release, or draw the month, whatever it is, and that's it. And it's intentionally broad. If the team really pushes back, I say, well, whatever it means to you, go ahead and start drawing. What happened this sprint? How did you feel about it? And then afterwards, we all reveal our pictures, and you talk about what's going on in your picture. This one's really interesting, and it really is true that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And these are words you won't necessarily get folks to say out loud normally. There may be things that people struggle to articulate using their words, but by expressing how they're feeling in a picture, they can sometimes surface things they would never have been able to do in another form, whether it's written or verbal. It's a lot of fun. I did this with a team, and they were so pleased and entertained with the drawings they had made that they went and taped them up in the refrigerator in the break room. And I was like, it's like a bunch of kids' drawings. And the salespeople were really confused. I'm like, what? They're like, was it take your kid to work day? I don't know. I'm like, no, we're just not very talented drawing. But we were learning, so this is good, right? What I also like about it is by asking people to think in pictures, you get a lot of insight into how your team thinks about things. And it sort of gives you a lot of insight into their personality. One of the things we're really trying to do as leads is we want to make sure we're facilitating really good conversation and communication in our team. And understanding how someone conceptualizes ideas, how they think about things, how they organize their thoughts can really help you when you're saying, why is there a communication problem? Oh, maybe it's a left brain, right brain thing, right? Maybe it's this person likes to communicate in a very linear fashion, and they're very detail-oriented, and they're struggling to connect with someone because they're maybe more right brain, right? And that person's more conceptual, and they have, they think in more abstract concepts, or they sort of jump around before they come to a conclusion. So you can draw out a lot of really interesting insights about yourself and about your team and how they sort of think about things. And again, you'll see this. You'll have drawings that are expressed in a very linear fashion. They tell this very specific story, like point to point to point to point. Some people may have drawings that are sort of flowy, like they may go off on a branch like a mind map and then come back to a central core and have another set of drawings that spin off on a new idea. Some people are just all over the place, and they have little clusters of interesting pictures and random things sort of happening. Remember before I said talking about feelings is difficult. It's very, very challenging, right? And to say I'm sad, that's probably the most vulnerable thing you could ask somebody to say in front of their coworkers. Most people will not say that. They're not going to write it down. They're not going to say it. But you'd be surprised how many people will draw this, right? They'll draw an unhappy face. They'll draw somebody crying. They'll draw a storm cloud. There's so many metaphors that let them surface those really uncomfortable things just through the power of pictures, right? You might see someone who this is a pretty good drawer, but maybe this person is stressed out, right? And they don't even know they're stressed out. And so it's really interesting how people express themselves when you give them that opportunity to think outside the box a little bit and do it in picture form. I had someone draw something very similar to this. So again, some people are quite linear thinkers, and so they literally just drew a timeline, and it was just a series of pictures on this very specific road that got us somewhere, and you're like, okay, that was pretty good. Now, the interesting thing is you'll also see, it is fun to see who's talented and who isn't, right? So you might get this, and you might get this. I don't know. But what's interesting about this is it's still a cluster, right? These are still two people talking about the same exact thing. Two people have cash on the brain. Some express it better than others, obviously. Maybe one's happy, one isn't about it, right? And you sort of see that. And we had this very funny thing happen with a team of mine where, independent of each other, 4 of the 10 developers drew rocket ships. And it was so interesting. I was like, oh, what is that metaphor? And they were, well, the sprint started slow, and you got really stuck, but then the last week we were just cranking, and it felt we were like on a rocket ship to the moon. And I was like, wow, and it's so fascinating to see how people will sort of settle into these common things as a team. Now, the quality of the rocket ship drawings sort of varied from person to person like this. But you see these really magical moments that sort of manifest themselves in pictures in a way that you won't get with your traditional text-based one. So when you use this? You use this to break up the monotony when things feel boring. If you have a team that's fairly listless, they haven't been outputting a lot on sticky notes, maybe they're a little disengaged, this is a really fun and delightful one because most people have never done a retrospective like this. And so every single time I've run this, there's been tons of smiles, a lot of laughing. People really enjoy this more than you'd think. Having said that, it's not one that you can use a lot. I would use it very sparingly, maybe once a quarter, because eventually you get tired of thinking of the drawings, or you sort of start gaming the system and in sort of like intentionally drawing pictures to hide your feelings, which is sort of a weird thing that happens. But do toss this one in as sort of an icebreaker or sort of to mix things up and try and just sort of surprise the team with something interesting and new. Retro number 3, timeline retro. This one's pretty easy. You draw a timeline with an arrow at one end, and the stickies in this case represent events. And you basically have good events, bad events, or problematic events, significant events. And as you write the stickies, you place them on the timeline approximately where they happened. And you get a visualization that looks a little bit like this. So you have 2 ways to sort of visualize those concepts of good, bad, and significant. You can either use colors if you are super prepared. Often I have to scrounge stickies up from wherever I can get them, and I don't have a lot of color choice. So instead, you can actually go above and below the line to show what's good and not good, and then you can be on the line if it's significant. This one's a great one to use. This is almost like Retros 101 because it's very, very easy to understand. Asking for inputs on some of the other ones, sometimes people get confused. This one's literally very easy. It's like, think about everything that's happened in the last 2 weeks, and if you think about it, put it on a sticky note, and then just put it on the timeline where it happened. So the team really instinctively understands how to provide these inputs. What's interesting is because it's time-based, not significance-based, it's going to catch things that other retros won't, right? Because when you're talking about what did you love, what did you long for, people try to come up with really good stickies. They want to think about something that's really powerful and significant. But a lot of times what's going on with your team might be that small thing that happened the day before, right? Someone got sick, someone had a bad day, maybe somebody was a little careless with a code push. But because people are thinking about in time, they conjure those events up. They remember things differently than the other retro formats. So you're going to surface things that might not show up before. And this is where the clusters are quite interesting. The clusters will build themselves by the nature of the exercise, right? Because when an event happens, all the other stickies about that event naturally line up. So you can look at those spikes and say, are there any small things that might have tipped us off to that big spike, whether it's positive or negative? It tells a really crisp story about what happened. You can use this all the time. You can use it for sprint retrospectives. It is good for postmortems to sort of say, oh, what just happened in the last 2 weeks. So you can really get to the root cause analysis. What's really interesting, and I've seen this happen before, is when there's disconnects. And half the team will put the stickies about the same event above the line, and half the team will put it below the line, right? And so some people might look at an event and say it's a really good thing. Some people might think it's a really bad thing. And that's a really good chance to say, okay, team, let's talk about that then. Like, why did you guys think it was a good thing? Why did you think it wasn't? Let's put our perspectives on the table, as it were. The 4th type of retro you can run with your team is one called the gratitude retro. And this one is also very simple. Each person writes down 2 to 3 thank you notes for other people on the team. You don't have to cluster. This is one where you will go around and you will read every sticky to each other. Why is this a good retro to run? It's really tremendous for team chemistry. It's one of those, like, the more you give, the more you get back, right? It feels really good to say something nice to someone. It's okay to take a break from being critical, right? I think it's very easy to fixate on all the things that are going wrong. And it's nice to say, you know what, for this week, let's just celebrate all the things that are great about our team and our teammates. And so it kind of gets you in that nice, positive state of mind. And sometimes, I think that last bullet is really important. We take for granted that people know that we recognize them, that we see what they're doing. And we had one instance where I had a developer, and multiple people said, hey, thanks for how fast you do code reviews. And he was almost moved to tears. He's like, I take so much pride in trying to be responsive as a teammate, but no one's ever said thank you before. And so people, I think sometimes it feels awkward to sort of say, hey, great job. I mean, I personally, I came from the military. I have a sports background, so I'm a high fiver. I'm super psyched about that. But not everyone culturally wants to do that. Especially, I live in London now, and the British are very resistant to my rah-rah. So I sort of wander forlornly around the office, sort of one hand up and a fist out. And I'm like, because someone's gonna high five me or fist bump me, right? And it just doesn't happen. So I think sometimes people don't really know how to make that connection and say, hey, I just want to tell you, great job or thank you for that. And the gratitude retro is a nice way to sort of introduce that practice into the team. It's a really good one to do at sort of the sprint level, just to sort of break things up. Use it as a change of pace retro only, though. This is one that you should be very, very careful not to overuse. Because the most important thing is you want these to be sincere thanks, right? And if it's one of those, your mom's like, oh, say thank you to the nice lady. If it becomes mechanical, it's not going to have a lot of impact with your team. So it's very important that it's an organic sort of sentiment. If your team is low energy, they haven't been very communicative, it's a good time to bring it in. The one thing with this retro, I will give you a few caveats on using it. This is a little bit of an advanced one. Think very carefully if you're going to use this with a team that has a lot of open conflict. If you have a team that has open conflict, they are probably not ready to give sincere thanks, right? And you may get something like, thanks for not being a jerk face today. Like, you don't want that. That could be very, very, I know you're all laughing, but it's like, that's a very damaging sentiment, right? So you don't want to feel like you're forcing the thanks. So if you have a team that has open conflict, I would use a different type of retro, or I would even take it out of the retro format, and you'd have some coaching to do sort of as a person. The other thing you want to be a little sensitive to, and this is when I will always participate in this retro, you don't want the sort of the Valentine's Day syndrome where someone doesn't get any thank you stickies. So if there is someone who's so I always try to make sure, like if I'm like, no, I don't know if anyone like is seeing the good work that person's doing, I make sure I go out of my way to have a couple of thank you stickies for them. But even though it's a little bit of high risk, it's huge high reward. This one, like constantly, like the team comes out of it very happy. I see them going to lunch more when we do this sort of retro. So I really encourage you to give it a go. The final retro that I'm going to talk to you all about is what's called the sailboat exercise. And again, this one's very simple. Forgive me, I drew this sailboat and it's terrible. I have my father's drawing ability, which is to say I have none. But you draw a sailboat and this represents our team. And this time when we do stickies, we have 4 things we're looking for. The wind in your sails, what drives us? What motivates us as a team? What's powering our engine, as it were? What are the anchors holding us back? That's supposed to be a hidden shoal or coral reef, I know, that blob there. What are the hidden dangers that are lurking beneath the surface that are going to shipwreck us, that are going to crash our ship? And then most importantly, and sometimes they leave this off in some versions of the sail, but I like to draw it on, what is the promised land, right? What does success look like to us as a team? What are we trying to achieve? So you'll want a big piece of paper to sort of draw this out. If you want a less terrible picture than mine, practice or look at pictures of sailboats until you can draw them with confidence. I like this one a lot. It really helps you center in on the big things that are impacting your team. When you say like the word anchor, that's a pretty serious word. Like those are things that have been holding us back, and usually they're things that have been holding us back for a really long time. And so you can kind of like start to root out or sniff out the things that have been plaguing your team over time. The shoals metaphor is actually quite powerful. It's very interesting to me how, like, that's the most vulnerable I've ever seen teams I've managed get is putting stickies on that thing, because these are things that are deep, abiding fears that are going to ruin everything, right? So these aren't things that are like kind of bothering me. These are things that are fundamental threats to my concept of the team or my own productivity. You can use it for sprint retrospectives. I certainly have, and it's fine. But I actually think it's much more interesting when you look at it with a longer time frame. So I tend to use it more strategically. I like to use it when the time where we're looking at roadmaps, if we're doing quarterly reflections. It's also very helpful when you want to reset a team. And so I did this exercise. I had just inherited a team who I didn't know very well. And we had just had a reorg, which is how they came under me. So I flew out and I did this retro with them. And the reason I did this one is I said, well, it's important to me to do this with you because I want to see what you guys value as a team, right? And I want us to get on the same page with, we've just had a reorg. What does success look like? Are we still on the same page about that, right? And so that metaphor was very powerful for them. What was really interesting at this team is they said, they sort of put their stickies up, and in the hidden shoals, almost all of them wrote the word attrition. And this was a company that had a lot of turnover. And one of the devs piped up and she goes, the funny thing is, we all wrote down attrition as a thing we're scared of, and yet this team has had no attrition. We're the only team in the company that hasn't had attrition. Well, what does that mean? I said, well, the interesting thing is it complements what I'm seeing in wind in our sails, because almost all of you wrote something along the lines of, the wind in my sails is the amazing teammates I have to work with every day. And so it's a very natural thing. Of course, if that's what powers you every day, that's your biggest fear, is losing that support network. That was a huge signal for me as a team lead that I needed to be very, very careful about team happiness and team dynamics, because any sort of disruption to that really did run the risk of fundamentally derailing that team. And it was really nice for them, and they were like, and then again, it was almost like a mini gratitude retro for them. They were like, oh yeah, we do love each other. Yeah, like group hug. It was really good. Again, with the other types of sprints, sometimes you'll surface very nitnoidy tactical things, like let's rename how we label our Git branches and things like that. Those are all important things to do, but sometimes you want to talk about much bigger issues, so the sailboat can really draw that out. And look at me, I'm almost right on time. I'm very excited about this. Some final thoughts. Retros only work if you do them and do them regularly, so please, it's basic hygiene. It's smoke detectors, it's brushing your teeth, it's whatever metaphor works for you there. Because the things you draw out of a retro sort of have a cumulative effect. You only want to fix 1 or 2 things per sprint. Like, you can't solve all of the world's ills. You may do a process change, but that might not be the right process change for you, right? And so it's very important that you continue to do these so you can revisit the effects of these process changes you're making as a group. Don't wait until the house is on fire to do them. Do them all the time. You want to make sure you're following up on your action items. Like I always tell my team, I'm like, I have no sacred cows. I have almost no sacred cows. If you tell me you don't want to write any tests, I'm going to fight you. But other than that, like the how we test or the how we name our branches, anything's on the table. All I ask is you try it for a couple of weeks, and then we can always change it. And that's what retros let you do. These are just a few of the tools, but obviously, just like the real world tools, there are many, many, many more that you can do. There's a link here. Like I said, you can go to that bit.ly link. I'm going to post these slides tonight if you want to get that link, or you can take a picture now. But I really want you to sort of take away, think very carefully about what you're trying to accomplish before you go into that retro. Know what you want to get out of it, know what you want your team to get out of it, and then pick the right tool for the job you're trying to do. There's a bunch I didn't cover. Remote teams, obviously what I talked about really was geared towards a team that's physically co-located, but there are techniques you can do if you're remote. What if your team is super large, what is cross-functional, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm out of time. So, but I do love talking about this stuff. My handle's at the bottom, so if you want to tweet at me and talk more, that's great. I hope you liked the talks. You can tweet at me if you did, and if you didn't like it, you can still tweet at me, and I will try out the new anti-abuse tools on Twitter, I guess. So, we'll see how that goes. So, go ahead and hit me. I'm ready. I'm ready. And one final, I always like to put this in here because it makes them embarrassed. This is a ringing endorsement on why you should do retros for my old teammate. That was my chief architect, and he resisted me every step of the way with every agile process I ever did. And he said this to me after the sailboat exercise because he gave me the hinky eye when it started. And he's like, it wasn't terrible, which for him was like, I'm going to carry that memory to my grave. It was so good. I felt so good. And that's it. Thank you so much. High fives.